still an ongoing project, so kind of what I'm hoping is that people will think and contribute and say, no, that's awful, what, this is a better way of doing it, or something like that. But I'm generally going to go through the principles of what I was trying to achieve, with why we should be doing more dev metrics, and logging is another bit of that, and what a few of us have built, one of them's just gone off to find food, and what we could do in the future. So we have live monitoring, and it's really good, and it's fancy and high tech, and it does record all the things, and it's a bit like you're in a high tech command center and you can see all the things that's going on, and it's brilliant. So we know how many requests we're getting, how many errors, we know if we're making bookings, all those sorts of things. If anyone can identify some of those command centers.
Avatar.
At least one of them's NASA.
Yes.
War Games.
Yeah. That was before you were born, Joe.
That's why I didn't know that. I don't know what the top left one is. That Minority?
Hunger Games, in an epically manly move. So yeah, it's a bit like that. And then, meanwhile in Dev, it's a bit more of a shanty town.
I can see my house from here.
So you could use this to describe our dev and test environment in more than one way. But in this way, I'm doing it in terms of a flow of information that's not, shall we say, an abundant source. But why do we care? We all complain about the CI being slow, I've done it, tests being flaky, goes awful, but we're not being data driven about it. We're not, we gave someone a stopwatch once and that was the best we did. But that's not particularly ideal, is it? Yeah, it took about 40 seconds, that's one snapshot. So why can't we take all the information from these tools and aggregate it into central source like we do for live? That way we could be data driven about things. We could do things, instead of it being based on feel, it feels a bit slow. We can say, I have quantitative evidence that says it is slow and it is costing us X amount. You could run data driven retrospectives, which can be extremely effective, but ironically there you don't want to remove all the feelings like the other bit. You still want people to talk about that, but using a data driven retrospective as one of your toolkits of retros is very good. And it should be for the team. So, as I say, data-driven retrospectives, post-mortems, use that data for what was released when, did all your tests pass? Hopefully you do that up front. Automatic release notes, track test brittleness. You could generate justification for improving pipelines. You could get all this information and it all could be used to help drive continuous improvement. But it could be abused. So if you have all this information, it could be very tempting to have a dashboard and say, well, that team cycle time is 4 days and your cycle time is 54. You suck. But that probably wouldn't be very fair, because that could be because one of them's on a legacy system and the other one's not. The other one could be doing in huge project work and the other one could be doing BAU. You just can't compare apples and oranges. So this is, as I say, an emphasis that this should be for the teams to drive their own continuous improvement and not for kind of scoreboards and gamification, because that could a dark path lead. So what did we begin? Well, one of my many mastery projects we called River Styx. I'll explain that in a second. Basically, I started something, as a few other people got interested. Joe's been a bit involved, Dan's done some stuff on it as well. And the idea was that we would pull together many different data sources and try and get some kind of flow of information like we have in live, but for the dev test environment. So what's River Styx? River Styx is, in Greek mythology, a deity and a river that form the boundary between Earth and the underworld. I ripped it from Wikipedia. So we continued our glorious history of misappropriating Greek mythology for project names. So it was follow on from Odyssey, if you will.
Phoenix, rising from the ashes again.
But really, it's a series of applications that have small specialised jobs, i.e. I process the output of a Go pipeline, that fit together and do clever things with the data. E.g., you could have, I had a git commit, and now I've noticed a pipeline's run, and all those git commits are actually to do with that pipeline run, so I'm going to link those bits of information together. But we won't have one big monolith trying to do all the things. We'll have lots of specialised microservices, if you will, that do one specialised job. It's more of the Unix way of thinking about things. Don't do lots of things poorly, do one thing very well, and then put that information back into the system so other bits can respond to that. So I shall draw the architecture on the whiteboard. It's a whiteboard, there's no advanced maths there. So, as I say, the idea is that there will be lots of small specialised applications that do one thing well and general stream of information. So we have a stream. And then you have inputs. So an input could be the webhook server. So on the webhook server we've got Go, Git, GitLab. Oh, actually we don't have Go. Zendesk, Leankit, all sorts. Then we also have other inputs. Qbot commands can come in. And then we also have the Go, and we use a web socket plugin to power information into there. So you've got all these sources of information. Then, at the middle bit, you might have, say, a Go pipeline build. Now, I don't know if you've seen the Go API or what it emits when it finishes a pipeline, but it's not totally useful. So we have a application that essentially processes that Go pipeline into some semblance of sanity. So that's one single application, and that's basically Go pipeline. So that will basically take in a WebSocket event and it will emit a more useful event. So in this case, what you guys see in Slack channel, that kind of thing, release completed, release started, it will spit out one of those events. Otherwise it would just be random pipeline name started, no context, no idea how long it's been running for, no idea of how long it actually is. It could be 1, it could be 94 steps. You wouldn't know because Go doesn't tell you that when it just spits out stuff in the WebSocket. So you have all these potentially numerous applications responding not only from these inputs but also potentially to what happens here. So the idea is you've got this big stream, and we used Rabbit, but we could have, of course, we're talking about streams, used Kafka, but I didn't feel like I wanted to beat myself with a rock in the head for a good 2 months, so I went with RabbitMQ, because it was a lot simpler to set up. There were no clustering, there was no multiple servers, it was just one RabbitMQ, and it works. And then you have outputs. So, you know, one of these could output stuff in just as easily, but you output, and you could output to Qbot, you could output to dashboards, you could output to webhooks, sockets, all sorts. So you can have applications whose sole job is just to sit and listen to that information and then emit things based on that. So Qbot, for example, connects to this queue and it listens out for pipeline events. And then it goes, yeah, this happened. So, you know, the most obvious manifestation that you should see is in the releases channel. Qbot will not tell you, your pipeline started, your pipeline finished. You know, hopefully that's led to less of David having to go on the channel, what's happening with that release? Because he gets told now, which is slightly better, one would hope. And then obviously we've started to extend it down to the route of, you know, the search channel gets occasionally spammed. There are some bugs, obviously. And Qbot sometimes goes a little bit crazy and tells you 94 million times that your pipeline is finished. But the end, as I say, the general architecture is message queue, stream of events, inputs, specialized applications, and then outputs. So I'll just cover off some of the existing applications that we've built as part of our mastery time, essentially, other things. One of the first things we did, David had talked about wanting to do a dashboard when he was doing the new release process stuff. He spoke about wanting to have a dashboard so that you could monitor how many releases are going on, that kind of thing. And doing it through Go would have been possible, but a bit of a pain. So I don't know if anyone's tried to deal with the cctray.xml, but it ain't pretty and it's not fun. So, and even then, polling that's not a great way of doing things. So I wanted to be a bit more event-driven of it, which is kind of how it led me to this whole thing. I just thought we could do more. So we got events coming in from Go, processed into, are we getting echo? Getting some kind of, maybe it's just me projecting too much, getting stuff processed and then spitting out, and then you go onto dashboard to Qbot, and all that works well. And all it really does is, this is listening to one type of event and then just spitting stuff out again. That was a nice simple one to begin with. I know some people, well, we've advised people move on to this for their own build dashboards. At the end, if anyone has feedback on that, that would be really good, because, as I say, its initial implementation was for the release dashboard. We kind of hammered it into use as a as a general build dashboard after we realised CC Tray was ragging Go somewhat chronic. So, if any feedback is definitely welcome. Another usage we've done is missing one, VictorOps. Everyone familiar with VictorOps?
No.
Nope. So, has everyone heard of PagerDuty? Nope. So, in out of hours, and in hours to a certain extent as well, an alert is raised within a tool, be it New Relic, iSinger, anything like that. We need to hear about it. Running your own phone systems or SMS bridges is an absolute pain. So companies have developed basically software as a service solutions to that. So they have an API endpoint, you send stuff into it, and they will phone you, message you, email you, any sort, and they'll keep doing that until someone acknowledges the alert. So out of hours is obviously incredibly useful, because if the site's down and the duty manager hasn't phoned up, hasn't answered the phone, then it can fail back to someone else, that kind of thing. You can define all sorts of rules. So VictorOps essentially is how we tell people we've had an incident. So as a way of keeping track of our alerts, I wanted to be able to basically take an alert, map it to a team, and allow them, we're not quite there with this yet, but the basic data's there, essentially be able to say, overnight you had 4 alerts. You know, that's either good or worse than 4, yay, or boo. Another webhook input, VictorOps is told, don't just tell the users about it, inform this webhook as well. So data comes in, another application, which is the VO listener. So again, I didn't want to put the logic into the VictorOps webhook, because it would be doing lots then. So this basically just takes in events and it stores them to Elasticsearch. I've basically used Elasticsearch as a document store quite a bit here, which is quite nice here, as you can see, because you can have instant visualizations of the number of alerts you've had. This was yesterday, I think, the day before yesterday. So obviously we had a burst of errors in the afternoon. And you can see that now thanks to this. VictorOps, for example, has a timeline, but it's not really a Cabana view, and it's reusing the tools that we use in live for essentially dev or build environment ones, metrics for the team that you can use, and we can use all this information to establish feedback cycles. So, you know, I've had this alert 5 times, and okay, at the end of the week, I'm going to send the duty manager an email and say, can you score these alerts and say how good or bad they were? Okay, did you ever have to respond to them? Did you have to take action? Okay, now we're getting feedback into the dev teams saying these alerts are of low value, or actually these alerts are great, good job. And that way we can establish feedback cycles on things that previously we had no visibility of. And that's where this kind of logging and quantitative approach can become really powerful. And so far that's worked well. We've got it going into Zendesk as well. So this not only goes into Elasticsearch, but also publishes out to Zendesk. So the the service team can also use it for their SLAs as well. You know, are we responding in time, that kind of thing. And it also keeps track of not only did we get an alert, who acknowledged it, when was it resolved? Was it resolved manually? Was it resolved automatically because the alert went below its threshold? And therefore it keeps track of that timing as well. So you can't see it there. So you see the teams unknown there. One of the things I've got to crack at the moment is a not incredibly tedious method of identifying based on the input and say a pipeline name or a product name, what team does it belong to? I don't know if you've seen our Go instance, but our naming strategy is none. Everyone has a different one. Some people use groups, some people use I. My particular favourite is the use of the word live when it's not live. Cheers, reservations.
That was Clarkin.
I curse Clarkin from beyond him moving jobs then. But yeah, it's a data sanitization issue, but it's one I'm trying to find a way if we can solve without it being tediously manually for every single input type, which so far it is. I have a big mapping JSON file of this team has these pipelines and this naming strategy in these environments, and you don't care about these ones, but you do care about these ones. It's very tedious. So that's alerts. Getting slightly more less fully implemented yet at this point. Dan did a lean kit input. So he previously had an application that looked at tickets and saw if they moved, and if they hadn't moved, he marked it as necrotic, which I think is quite a cool way of looking at it. So basically, it's about to drop off dead. So on the board, they could say this ticket hasn't moved. What's this all about? So previously, it had been done by a little application sat there pinging, but he did it. He moved it over to use the sticks style of doing things. So it's basically emit the event into here, and then other people can benefit from it. So immediately now you have what was a tool for one team that could provide value to that team, could now provide it to lots of people. And that's the thing, you know, I had a tool when I was on Global Brands that kept track of cycle time and stuff like that, but it was so specific and so difficult to move to other teams because it was this big monolithic beast. It's a lot easier to think about how things, when they're only doing one thing, can be made to work for many people than it is when you have this big monolith. As we know, they're unwieldy, they're difficult, they're not easy to use, they're not nice to code for. So that was another good recent one, Lean Kit, that was nice. And Dan, craziness injection, also much appreciated. And then there was the Lean. It's not meant to say Lean Kit, it's meant to say Zendesk. A copy and paste file. That's coming soon. Talk to Joe. It's really frustrating, I'm sure, for him, because he said this isn't working, and then about a week later I saw data flowing in and it clearly was working. So you clearly did all the work right, and then something just magically started fixing it. But it's there, it's just not being used. So talk to Joe and maybe we can, do more with it. So where next? We have some inputs, but this whole thing is built on more data. So the idea is we get more input sources. We are currently getting GitLab stuff into the webhooks, but they go straight off to the Go server. So that's not going in there yet technically. So I want to move those so they're flowing in, because then we can respond to things on that one. I'll cover that a bit more in a second. Other information as well, I'm sure there's loads. It's just getting all the more data that is in there. It's a bit like, our experience with Elk and Logstash and Kibana is the more data that's in there, the more effective it is. We put errors in there immediately, and that was useful. That was good. We could kind of group them and stuff like that. But we found that we got a lot more power when we put all the varnish logs in there, because now you have much more context. And then you put the booking events in, and then you got more context still. I've got errors, but now I've also got bookings. The errors went up, bookings went down. Bad things happened. So, I've got some flaky tests as go output because it's a type of pipeline completion, and actually I've just noticed that my Lean Kit cycle time has gone up. Okay, so I can now correlate that flaky tests equal worst cycle time. Okay. So yeah, more data. I'm going to shove it in Docker. At the moment, if anyone's interested, because things do fail, I can explain where it lives, what applications currently exist, that kind of thing. But what I'm hoping for is a bit more of a kind of a snap together architecture. So at the moment it's living on a box, but they're just independently installed node applications. It'd be nice if we could utilize Docker for this, because it's quite a nice use case. Because we're dealing with small specialized applications, can we have basically just a Docker compose file or whatever that says, I've got a RabbitMQ Docker container, and then list of all the other ones, and they just connect. And the only ones that have need inputs, for example, are the ones that specify I have ports in. It's just this nice isolated. You can spin it up locally. You can test it. It seems like quite a nice kind of composable format for Docker. So planning on working on that. At the moment, one thing I've noticed, so much boilerplate code, because everything talks to RabbitMQ and everything posts back onto RabbitMQ. Essentially every single one of our little applications has talk to RabbitMQ, publish to RabbitMQ, listen to RabbitMQ, on this type of message do this, on that type of message do that. So what I'm hoping for is, instead of repeating the same code again and again and again, I don't know if everyone's familiar with Express and Node, but if you're not, essentially Express is the most used HTTP server abstraction in Node, and essentially you have this use statement. So instead of having to go down to the low level and do routing stuff, you basically say .use root, function or other options, and you can respond things on it. So my idea is that essentially you would have an RS core or whatever, an npm, and you would say RabbitMQ on this event this is the handler on this event, this is the handler, and then you just raise a message internally saying publish, it goes back onto the queue. That way we don't have the same stuff again and again and again, and it makes the barrier to entry is much lowered. So if you have an idea for something, hopefully instead of having to know about what RabbitMQ and how to deal with the messages and stuff, you've got like a starter pack that says, actually you don't need to care too much about this, you get a JSON message in and you pump out a JSON message there and maybe talk to some other APIs, but your involvement in it is reduced. And obviously because it's snapping modules together, I went with Swordfish as the ultimate rendition of coding in any film known to man. And ultimately what I'm hoping to get to is you don't need to build your own applications at all yourself. Is everyone familiar with the online service, if this then that?
Yeah.
So something like this, so essentially you will pipe things through various things. So if an event for pipeline completion comes through, then trigger something else. So for example, when a ticket moves into a certain link column, raise an RFC in Zendesk. Suddenly you don't need to be manually doing stuff, and then just maybe Hubot can tell you, oh yeah, we just automatically create you an RFC. I'll let you know when it's moved into approved. And then, Hubot suddenly now is your development butler. He's there to tell you this has occurred, or I've got this ready for you. And that kind of plug and play sort of architecture, instead of having to build things every single time, to be able to say this message comes in, respond this way, means that people could very quickly develop their own workflows based on standard tooling, and they could very quickly create very complex automated systems. Yay, don't know the complex bit. So the last bit of what's next, hopefully, is you. If you can take a box of random crap and make it work, then you could probably do something useful with the inputs to RiverSticks, and hopefully your ideas can move us on to more exciting things. As I say, this one's a bit of a weird one because we're very much in progress, but I just thought I wanted to explain the thought process, get everyone's feedback on what we've done so far, and see if anyone else wants to get involved.
Thank you. If you've got any questions?
Where's the code?
I will, so that channel, RiverSticks, I'll post in the current applications and where they live in GitHub. They currently live on mine. I'm hoping when we do the core RiverSticks module that I'm basically going to set up a new organisation in GitHub, or open source, and they can all go in there. At the moment it is very bodged together. So I'm hoping when we do Docker, when I do RiverSticks core, when those ones are there, there'll be a nice, more professional place to store them all. But for now, there's a mismatch of stuff on mine, his, Dan's, GitHubs.
Currently, I'm trying to set up something for that dashboard for TeamCity.
Yes.
Will this be a right place to?
You could, yes. I would more than love to have an extra one, like we've got Go, having TeamCity to go in there as well. Just be a matter of looking at how, is it using a webhook? Is it using, can you have a WebSocket like Go? I have no idea how TeamCity informs you when jobs start and end. But
so
yeah.
Right now they have a REST endpoint. I just go and poke them and then get the information back. I'm just trying to build something. I can have a look to see what else is available. I'm just looking.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pop by tomorrow afternoon in the mastery hour or whatever, give me a shout. We'll have a look at it together and we'll see if we can find out. Because as I say, in general, I've tried to avoid polling because it's a bit icky, and it's trying to be more of an event-driven one. But obviously, worst case scenario, if there isn't anything, you have to. But yeah, if there's a webhook that says pipeline completion, do this, or if there's a WebSocket that can emit stuff, then all the better.
You thought about whether we'll need to curate it or how we'll curate it? So imagine a bucket full of loads of good stuff. Navigating your way through it can get quite.
Yes, as someone who said yes, throw anything you want into the live Elasticsearch, it's fine, it's our dynamic data store. I can definitely say that in hindsight we should have nudged people in the right direction. So if you're doing this, so there probably should be some matching format between the Go and the TeamCity web, input messages as much as possible. There will need to be some kind of coordination saying this is the format of a message, this is what it should look like. So far at the moment we've got very few people working on it, so it's quite easy to handle. I'm not sure how we'll handle it when we get more, especially if it does become a used open source project. But yeah, talking from experience, oh god, yes.
What are the inputs to the VictorOps? Because we're taking the outputs, but presumably we also have control of the inputs.
VictorOps does have an API. We could, if we wanted to, raise an alert. So you could literally, there's an API that you can say, Awooga, I'm trolling the out of hours people.
But what I mean is, where is it? How does it know that it needs to raise an alert? It presumably is actually getting its data from the RabbitMQ in the first place.
Not quite. So VictorOps, to draw it separately, essentially is a box in the cloud, and you configure various integrations. So one, for example, is iSinger, and that goes in. So that uses a webhook, but it's essentially wrapped in a Debian package. So you go apt-get install VictorOps for iSinger, and then essentially it installs itself, all its little endpoints on the server, and then you just configure these type of alerts go to VictorOps. And then you get stuff like New Relic, and that's a webhook. So in New Relic you can configure who to inform when an alert fires. So that might be
VictorOps is a contact that you can use to inform.
Yep. So, like you can email the hotel distribution team, for example. You can also say, actually email send a webhook with all the details to VictorOps. And in that case, all it is simply VictorOps provides you a URL that says, this is the URL for your webhook. Put it into New Relic, and it HTTPs out. And then there are various outputs as well. So there's a webhook one, that's the one we use. There's a Hubot one. To get everything we need, we actually munge those two data sources together. So the outgoing webhook, for example, doesn't tell you when someone acknowledges alert. It doesn't tell you when someone resolves an alert. So that information comes from the Hubot. I've got now 2 Hubots running. One acts as a bridge between VictorOps and RabbitMQ, essentially. And we take those 2 bits of information and try and create a coherent event from it. But it's only through having this whole stream idea that became not a giant pain. Otherwise, you would have been bits all over the place.
Is there a capacity limit to how much we can put in the RabbitMQ?
In the RabbitMQ, you'll run out of disk space on what the data store you're trying to do before you run out of capacity on the RabbitMQ. It can seriously deal with hundreds of millions of events per hour. We've got one running on Telap 221p for the live log stash streaming, and we've never had a problem with it. Except one time when it died because the server ran out of disk space and it was backing stuff up. Then that server's purpose is not to run a RabbitMQ on Windows, but it does, and it deals with all the live events of which we're dealing with. Even if we were very, very, very frequent committers, there's no way we could go toe-to-toe with the traffic that our website pushes through, and then the API traffic, and so on and so forth.
How are we using, so when it pushes stuff in, is it essentially putting, so we've got like fan-out exchanges, so these things are just like listening?
Yes, it's actually quite a poorly thought out use of RabbitMQ, because I just use a fan-out one because that's one I always use. But having spoken to Julian, who knows lots more about RabbitMQ than I do, Topic would have been a much better use. So each application is actually only interested in a handful of event types. So your VictorOps handler is unlikely to care about Go events. At the moment, every single application, because it is a fan-out exchange and every connected queue. So for those who don't know about fan-out exchanges in RabbitMQ, you have an exchange, and that's where events go into. And then you can connect multiple queues to it. So you have queue. So if you're in a fan-out exchange, every event that goes in gets sent out to every queue, so on and so forth. That's hence why it's called fan-out. If you had you often have one client connected to each queue as well. So that might be Go, that might be VictorOps, so on and so forth. You can therefore actually scale your application horizontally by having multiple applications read from the same queue. So assuming your application carries no state internally, you could have each one of those workers reading from the same queue, and you would end up having 3 workers as opposed to 1, and they would round robin reading messages. You wouldn't get 3 copies of it. So in this one now, you've essentially got 3 fan out, 1 fan out exchange, 3 queues connected to it, 1 queue has 3 connected clients. So they're round robining, and the other ones are both getting the same copy of each event. They're getting 1 for it. So what we should have used is a topic exchange. A topic one allows you to say, actually, this is a Go event, this is a Victor's event, and you can structure it using alert dots and stuff like that. And so what you can then do here is you can say, actually, this queue is listening to vo.star. It will now no longer get Go events. It will only get vo.whatever events. So that way, your applications, A, don't have to deal with nearly as much traffic, but also they don't have to deal with things saying, throw away this, it's not anything to do with me, throw away this, it's not anything to do with me. So in hindsight, topic would have been a much better idea, but I didn't know it also did fan out, which it does. So topic does all the things a fan out exchange does, just with clever routing. And of course, you could actually just say, listen to everything as well.
Yeah, because it feels a little bit like you're on about building an MPI style package. You want the abstraction away from RabbitMQ. You can see if you wanted people to use it open source, they might go, well, we don't want to use Rabbit, we want to use
Kafka,
or we want to use SUS, if you could do that.
Totally, very true. At the moment, as I say, because we've used fan out, in theory you could connect it to something that has no concept of topics and it would still work the same way. Yeah, I mean, you'd be looking at the point where then your NPM would have kind of like IOC type sort of dependency injection style structures where you could say, actually, this is your strategy for putting stuff in and out of a queue, that kind of thing.
Fundamentally, it's each little thing that says, I care about these events and I'm going to tell something about these events.
Yeah.
That's all it needs to do.
Totally. But there are some slight complications. So obviously this talks to the Go API to get additional information, because as I say, the incoming event is largely useless. But it's a good notification that something happened, but it doesn't tell you anything about actually the larger context of things.
I wonder if we should write a queue handler, a package that handles the queue, and then it's abstracted and just subscribe or publish the topic.
And then you could swap out that package that deals with queues for Kafka for any one of them.
It solves the problem of redundancy in the current apps.
Yep. I do sometimes wonder when we go down that path though, are we just re-implementing Logstash?
Yeah, you need to have, it's the layer, isn't it? Because anything other than thin, yes you are.
But we're being more specialised, maybe. But yeah.
Also, I'd say, as you saw with when you set up Elasticsearch and stuff, everyone started using it really quickly and it suddenly became this really important, critical system. How do we dev again? Or how do we make changes here when David's like going, well, I can't see the release data.
Yes, and as many people may have noticed too, he got quite angry when Dan broke the webhook server. We don't have any kind of dev environment at the moment. I'm hoping that a move to Docker would alleviate that, because you'll be able to go spin up the entire environment, you're there. But there needs to be some, well, we need space in the dev test environment. At very least, you can dev locally, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, that's one of the things the hope from Docker is not only do you get the composable format, but you also get representative test environment.
I think you get it adopted to a level where it would be a problem, and then it becomes easy.
Yeah,
because we just pay for it.
We had the initial hump with Dan messing with this, and this application has largely been stable now. We haven't had to mess with it too much. Large majority of the development now goes on in these sub applications. And they're the ones that, that's lucky because this lives in live, so it's a pain in the ass to update RFCs, all that kind of jazz. This, because it's not within the live environment, it's a lot simpler just to be able to go, dev something new, spit it out. Yeah, you're going to probably annoy David, but again, this is early days. So the more mature it gets, the more mature we'll get about it.
Why does that bit have to live in live? The inputs bit?
The webhook server for externally accessible things must live must be accessible externable. So I believe when Martin set up the webhook server, it was unknown that we could have a test server that was a test IP that was externally accessible. So he requested it in live. So that's where it lives.
We still can't have test IPs that are externally accessible very easily. Surprise more. Every time I ask for it, it's been like, no, go away.
Angelo tried harder then because he got web tests externally accessible. Ages ago you did.
Yeah, we've got a DMZ.
Sorry, was that?
That was just the webhooks one then. So
Yeah, just the webhooks.
the other input, then wherever.
This lives internally. The other
It's
thing
not
nice,
like Rabbit. It needs to be in line to talk to push
No.
up into.
No.
which is, to be honest, another slightly nice thing about this is because everything it can be distributed. You can put applications where they need to be, and they just need access to one thing. The Rabbit MQ. Single point of failure.
We just need to consider it like we would any live service. Let's get it exposed so long as we understand what the risk is and mitigate the risk.
Yeah. It's certainly a lot safer than exposing Go.
That box is our hole into the dev test environment. We use it for other things as well. And it's a teeny tiny little box.
Yeah.
Your desk.
It's not at my desk, it's in live.
No, but Hubot does still live under my desk. But yeah, if anyone wants to get involved, wants to find out more, pop by whenever. We have a special Slack channel.
Sorry, I was just going to ask about Hubot. You say it lives on your desk. Is Hubot? What is Hubot?
Hubot is a chatbot that was created by GitHub as part of what they call ChatOps. So it is an NPM of which you can then include many other modules. So it's a whole modular thing, similar to what we're trying to achieve here. So the whole ChatOps idea is that if you have a collaborative tool that everyone can see, when you're doing a merge, for example, no longer do you have to tell everyone, to someone to say, oh, have you merged my pull request, because they can see it. They can also see what you did to merge that pull request, if you did the command, that kind of thing. So our Hubot, for example, largely is an announcer. He doesn't do too many commands yet. So he'll tell you your release is in progress, is done. You can ask him what releases are scheduled, that kind of thing. He's there essentially to automate things that we do a lot. But the nice thing about Hubot is that it's very, very lightweight automation. It's not writing a whole bloody suite of distributed applications with a message queue. It's a few lines of Node.js or CoffeeScript if you're feeling self-masochistic.
Get onto one of the channels and ask Hubot for help.
They'll give you a big
Tell you
list.
what he does.
Well, I know, but that doesn't mean I don't know what it is. If you see what I mean, the mechanics of how that's happening.
Right, there's a really good article.
It's just Joe responds.
Yeah, it's just
It's actually all mechanical term.
really,
All
really
Joe
hard.
Ryan.
So you guys can stop asking for help.
That does imply Joe's under your desk, though.
yeah, I hear that.
If you want,
Strange relationship.
if you did want me to go through, I did an introduction. Obviously, that was some time ago now. I need to do a refresher on what we've added since, because quite a bit's been added. But if you're interested in Hubot specifically, just pop round whenever. But there is GitHub have many YouTube videos. If you Google ChatOps in GitHub, they've got a lot of videos that will probably describe it better than me because they invented it. And there's also some articles and stuff on the subject. It's taken quite a lot of momentum at this point. It's been in stuff like Business Insider and stuff as well now. One thing I read in that was GitHub, for example, when you go into their office, they have a little chat terminal and you can say, I'm here, and Hubot will say, oh, I've informed the person you're seeing. They'll come grab you in a minute.
Al, you were going to say there was a really good article. What were you...
Yeah, that one.
Right.
There's a lot
Sorry.
on it. I was going to say something at the start. You said about the danger of exposing loads of data. That's just about education.
Yeah.
About what does it mean?
Yeah, totally. It's one of the reasons for that is Velocity. I went to a talk by ING where they had done something very similar. They were a bank, so it was all closed source. But they basically they use it to send in their coaches, and they give their data, and they can target their coaches. And their coaches come in, and it would just had a fairly scary element when they described it that way for me. But you know, you have to be sensible about it, don't you?
Yeah, I'm encouraging many folk in the organisation, including the board, to understand what the data actually means, and then don't look at a report and that's what it means, but go to the source of the data and understand what it means.